Pregnant woman in a remote village delivers and locals are terrified when the baby arrives. In the shadow of the towering mountains, nestled within dense woods, there lay the secluded village of San Belladou. For centuries, its name was barely whispered beyond the valley's edge. The villagers preferred it that way, a quiet life, shielded from the world, their traditions untouched by modernity. Yet, their peace was fragile, balanced on a knife's edge of superstition and fear. It was in this village that Emilia arrived, her swollen belly a testament to the life she carried, and the doom the villagers believed she would bring. Emilia had stumbled into the village one crisp autumn evening. Her face was pale, her clothes torn from a treacherous journey through the woods. She said little at first, clutching her belly protectively. The villagers watched from behind their doors, their oil lamps flickering against weathered wooden walls. Old Mateo, the village head, finally stepped forward, his furrowed face twisted in suspicion. "Who are you, and why are you here?" he demanded, his voice a gruff echo in the silent village square. "My name is Emilia," she replied, her voice trembling. I need help. I'm with child, and I've nowhere else to go." The villagers exchanged wary glances. In San Belladou, pregnancies outside of their closely knit community were rare, almost unheard of. Some whispered of curses, others muttered about omens. But even they couldn't ignore a woman in distress. Reluctantly, Mateo nodded, and the midwife, Rosa, stepped forward to lead Emilia to a small, empty hut near the edge of the village. The days that followed were tense. Emilia's presence disrupted the delicate balance of San Belladou. While Rosa attended to her medical needs, others watched from afar, their whispers growing louder. Mateo convened the village elders, their discussion heated. "She arrived unbidden," said Tomas, the blacksmith, his burly arms crossed. "We don't know what she brings with her." "Or who the father is," added Pilar, the baker's wife, her voice sharp as a blade. "She could bring a curse upon us all." Rosa, the only voice of reason, pushed back. "She's just a woman in need. Let's not jump to conclusions." But the unease grew. Emilia's pregnancy progressed rapidly, unnaturally so. Rosa, experienced though she was, found herself baffled by the complications that arose. The baby moved too much, its kicks strong enough to bruise Emilia's skin. Emilia's cries echoed through the village at night, a haunting melody that sent shivers down spines. Then came the visions. "I saw her in the woods," whispered young Mateo's granddaughter, Isabella, one morning. Her wide eyes darted between the villagers gathered in the square. She was glowing, like she wasn't human. Her words sent a ripple of fear through the crowd. Soon, tales spread of strange lights near Emilia's hut at night, of animals refusing to go near. The village priest, Father Esteban, declared that they needed divine intervention. "This child she carries," he said during Sunday Mass, his voice trembling with fervor, "it is no ordinary child. We must prepare ourselves for what may come." Despite their fears, no one dared to confront Emilia directly. She remained in her hut, isolated except for Rosa's visits. The midwife, though deeply shaken, refused to abandon her. She began to notice strange changes in Emilia's demeanor, moments where her eyes seemed to glow faintly in the dim light, her voice taking on an eerie, echoing quality. "I don't understand what's happening to me," Emilia whispered one night as Rosa checked her vitals. Tears streamed down her face. "The baby, it's not just mine. I feel something else." "Something else?" Rosa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Emilia hesitated. "It's hard to explain. Sometimes it feels like it's speaking to me. But not with words." Rosa's blood ran cold. Still, she continued to care for Emilia, driven by equal parts compassion and a morbid sense of duty. The night the baby arrived, a storm raged over San Belladou. Lightning illuminated the village in brief, jagged flashes. The wind howled through the narrow streets, rattling shutters and snuffing out lamps. Inside Emilia's hut, a crowd had gathered. Despite their fear, curiosity drew the villagers closer. They stood in a circle, their faces pale, their breaths shallow. Emilia lay on a makeshift bed, her body drenched in sweat. Rosa barked orders, her hand steady despite the chaos. "Boil water." "More towels," she shouted, her voice cutting through the storm. Outside, the church bell tolled on its own, the rope swaying violently despite the still air inside the bell tower. The villagers exchanged terrified glances. "She's bringing it," Father Esteban murmured, clutching his crucifix tightly. Something unholy. The labor was long and grueling. Emilia's screams pierced the night, mingling with the thunder. Rosa worked tirelessly, her face set in grim determination. But as the baby crowned, a strange glow filled the room, emanating from Emilia's belly. "What is that?" someone gasped, stepping back. The glow intensified, bathing the room in an otherworldly light. And then, with one final scream, the baby emerged. For a moment, silence reigned. The glow faded, leaving only the dim light of the oil lamps. Rosa held the newborn in her hands, her eyes wide with shock. It wasn't like any baby she had ever seen. Its eyes were luminous, its skin marked with faint, intricate patterns that seemed to pulse softly. The baby let out a cry, a sound that resonated deep within the villagers' chests, filling them with equal parts awe and terror. Emilia, weak but conscious, reached for her child. "Give him to me," she whispered. But Rosa hesitated, her hands trembling. The villagers began to back away, their fear mounting. "This isn't natural," someone muttered. "This child, it's not human." Father Esteban stepped forward, his crucifix held high. "We must cleanse this evil before it consumes us all." "No!" Emilia cried, her voice raw. "He's just a baby. He's my baby." The room erupted into chaos. Some villagers sided with Emilia, their compassion overcoming their fear. Others called for drastic measures, their superstitions ignited like dry kindling. And as the storm outside reached its peak, the baby's cries grew louder, the intricate patterns on its skin glowing brighter. The villagers fell silent, their eyes fixed on the child. Something ancient and powerful seemed to stir within the small wooden hut, a presence that defied understanding. The night was far from over. And for the villagers of San Belidu, life would never be the same. The baby's cries resonated through the hut, sharp and piercing, vibrating the very air. Emilia held the child close, her pale fingers trembling against its soft, glowing skin. The baby's unusual patterns pulsed faintly, like veins carrying light instead of blood, and its eyes, deep and luminous, seemed to look right through her. "Stay back!" Emilia screamed as Father Esteban approached, his crucifix raised. Her voice was hoarse, broken from the hours of labor, but her desperation gave it power. "She carries a curse," Father Esteban declared, his voice shaking yet resolute. "The child is an abomination, a vessel of something dark." "No," Rosa cut in, stepping between Emilia and the priest. "This is still a child, a newborn. We don't understand what's happening, but we can't act out of fear." The villagers murmured uneasily. Some nodded in agreement, their gazes softening, but others gripped wooden tools and farming implements as if preparing to defend themselves. Pilar, the baker's wife, clutched her rosary beads so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Do you see its skin?" she hissed. "Do you hear that sound? This isn't human." Tension hung thick in the air, each heartbeat a drumbeat to the growing divide in the room. Emilia pulled the baby closer, its cries beginning to soften, but the glow from its patterns grew stronger. The light was warm, almost soothing, yet it seemed to unearth something primal in the villagers, a terror that had no name. "Listen!" Tomas the blacksmith shouted, silencing the crowd. His booming voice carried authority, his massive arms crossed over his chest. "We can't stand here and argue all night. This storm is a sign, this thing brings danger. It's not just a baby, it's a warning. Enough." Rosa's voice rang out. "Do you hear yourselves? This storm is no more a sign than the wind or the rain. This child is helpless, and so is its mother. Whatever you think this is, we must first care for them." "Care for them?" Pilar spat, her face contorted with fear and anger. And then what? Wait until that thing grows up and curses us all? We've lived in peace for generations. She came to us, uninvited, with a baby that doesn't belong to this world. I say we. You'll do no such thing, shouted an elderly voice from the corner of the room. Mateo, the village head, stepped forward, his cane thumping against the wooden floor with each deliberate step. We are not savages. We will not harm a mother and her child. Not while I draw breath. A hush fell over the room. Despite his frailty, Mateo commanded respect. The crowd parted slightly to let him through. He stood beside Rosa, his lined face stern but not unkind. Fear will be our undoing, he continued, his voice low but firm. We know nothing of this child or what it means. But we do know this woman came to us for help, and it is our duty to give it. Father Esteban scowled but held his tongue, his grip tightening on the crucifix. The villagers began to shuffle awkwardly, their fervor dampened but not extinguished. One by one, they retreated, leaving only Rosa, Mateo, and Emilia in the dimly lit hut. You've made enemies tonight, Rosa murmured to Emilia as she wiped the sweat from the young mother's brow. This child, whatever it is, they'll blame you for every shadow that falls over this village. Emilia looked down at her baby, her tears mingling with the soft glow of its skin. I didn't ask for this, she whispered. I don't even know what it means. Neither did Rosa. But she knew fear when she saw it, and fear had a way of growing roots. The days that followed were uneasy. The storm cleared, but its effects lingered like a curse over San Belladou. The villagers avoided Emilia's hut, their gazes darting away when they passed it. Some whispered of strange sounds at night, others claimed to see flickering lights through the cracks in the walls. Even the animals seemed uneasy, their eyes wide and their movements jittery. Inside the hut, Emilia struggled with her new reality. The baby was quiet most of the time, but its presence was anything but ordinary. Rosa noticed that the glow from its skin intensified when it was upset, and its cries carried an almost hypnotic quality, like a song that drew the listener closer even as it terrified them. It's not normal, Rosa admitted one evening, her voice barely audible over the crackle of the hearth. But it doesn't feel evil. Just different. Emilia nodded, her fingers brushing the baby's soft curls. I feel it too. Like it's connected to something. Something old. That connection soon became impossible to ignore. It began with the crops. One morning, the villagers awoke to find their fields wilting, the leaves brittle and brown despite the recent rain. Tomas blamed Emilia immediately, his booming voice echoing through the square. She's cursed us, he bellowed. The baby is draining the life from our land. The villagers murmured in agreement, their fear turning to anger. Pilar led a group to confront Mateo, demanding that Emilia and her child be cast out. But Mateo stood firm, his weathered face unyielding. We will not abandon them, he said. If the land is failing, it is not their doing. It's the season, nothing more. But even Mateo's authority couldn't quell the growing unrest. The villagers grew bolder, their whispers turning to shouts. They began leaving offerings at the edge of the woods, bread, flowers, even coins, hoping to appease whatever force they believed the child had summoned. Emilia noticed the change. The villagers no longer hid their disdain, their cold stares burning into her back whenever she ventured outside. She began to stay indoors, clutching her baby tightly, her fear growing with each passing day. One night, as the village slept, a scream shattered the silence. Emilia bolted upright, her heart pounding. She rushed to the window and saw flames flickering in the distance. One of the barns was on fire. The villagers gathered quickly, their panic turning to rage. It's her! Pilar shrieked, pointing toward Emilia's hut. She's brought this on us. Before Emilia could react, a group of men stormed toward her door, their torches casting long shadows across the walls. The baby began to cry, its glow illuminating the dark room. Emilia backed away, clutching her child as the door burst open. Leave her alone! Rosa shouted, stepping in front of the mob. But the villagers were beyond reason, their fear and anger boiling over. And then, the baby did something no one could have expected. The baby's cry grew louder, resonating in a way that made the torches flicker and the walls vibrate faintly. The glow from its skin intensified, casting strange patterns of light and shadow across the room. The villagers froze mid-step, their anger replaced by an instinctual fear. The baby's cry wasn't just a sound anymore, it was a force, almost tangible, and it reached deep into the hearts of those present. "What is that?" Tomas stammered, his grip on his torch faltering. Pilar stepped back, clutching her rosary. It's a demon." But Rosa stood her ground, her arms spread protectively in front of Emilia and the child. "This is no demon. You're letting your fear blind you. Can't you see it's just a baby? Just a baby?" Father Esteban growled, his voice shaking. "Look at it. This is no ordinary child. It's unnatural. It's evil." Before anyone could act further, the baby's cry reached its crescendo, and the glow from its skin burst outward in a wave of light. The torches extinguished instantly, plunging the room into darkness save for the child's eerie luminescence. The villagers screamed, some dropping their tools as they scrambled toward the door. The oppressive light seemed to press against their chests, making it hard to breathe, their fear now choking and visceral. Mateo, the village head, was the first to regain his composure. His voice cut through the panic like a knife. "Enough. Everyone, stop. Can't you see what you're doing? You're letting fear turn you into monsters." The light began to dim as the baby's cries subsided, leaving the room bathed in an uneasy silence. Slowly, the villagers stopped their retreat, though they still cast wary glances toward Emilia and the child. The air felt charged, as if the storm from days before had left something behind. This child is not ordinary," Mateo said, leaning heavily on his cane as he stepped forward. "That much is clear. But we do not kill out of fear. We are better than that." Father Esteban bristled. "And what do you propose, Mateo? That we let this thing stay among us? Risking everything we've built?" "I propose that we wait," Mateo said firmly. "That we learn before we condemn. If this child is a threat, we will deal with it when we know more. But until then, we protect it. That is our way." His words carried weight, but the villagers were far from convinced. Pilar muttered curses under her breath, and Tomas looked ready to argue, but neither dared challenge Mateo openly. One by one, they began to leave, their mutters of discontent lingering in the air. Rosa turned to Emilia, who sat trembling on the bed, her arms wrapped tightly around her baby. "It's okay," Rosa whispered, though she wasn't entirely sure if it was true. "For now, you're safe." But safe was a relative term. Over the following days, the atmosphere in the village grew darker. The fields continued to wither, the livestock grew restless, and strange occurrences became the norm. Pots would crack without reason, doors would swing open on their own, and faint, otherworldly whispers could sometimes be heard at night. The villagers blamed the baby for everything, their fear and resentment growing with each passing day. Pilar and Tomas took it upon themselves to stir unrest, gathering others who shared their fears. They spoke in hushed tones about taking matters into their own hands, about protecting San Belladou from the evil that had infiltrated it. Their influence spread like a poison, and soon, Emilia and her child were no longer just outcasts, they were targets. Meanwhile, Emilia began to notice something strange about her baby. Its patterns of light seemed to shift and change, forming shapes that resembled symbols she couldn't understand. Sometimes, when the baby looked at her, she felt an overwhelming sense of calm, as if it were trying to communicate something beyond words. But other times, especially when the villagers' anger flared, the baby would grow agitated, its glow brightening as if it were absorbing their fear and hatred. One night, as Emilia sat by the fire, rocking her child to sleep, Rosa burst into the hut. Her face was pale, her breath short. "Emilia, you need to leave. Now." "What? Why?" Emilia asked, her voice trembling. They're coming, Rosa said, her voice urgent. Pilar and Tomas, they've gathered a mob. They're coming to take the baby. Mateo and I tried to stop them, but they won't listen. You need to run. Emilia's heart pounded in her chest. She clutched her baby tightly, her mind racing. Where can I go? There's nowhere safe. There's a path through the woods, Rosa said, grabbing a shawl and wrapping it around Emilia's shoulders. It's dangerous, but it leads to the next village. You'll have to trust me. The sound of angry voices and footsteps reached their ears, growing louder by the second. Emilia looked at Rosa, tears streaming down her face. I don't know if I can do this. You can, Rosa said firmly. You have to. For the baby. With Rosa's help, Emilia slipped out the back of the hut, the baby held close to her chest. The cold night air bit at her skin as she stumbled toward the edge of the village. Behind her, the mob reached the hut, their shouts filling the air as they realized she was gone. Find her. Pilar's voice rang out, sharp and venomous. Don't let her escape. Emilia ran as fast as she could, her bare feet pounding against the uneven ground. The baby began to cry softly, its glow faint but still visible in the darkness. She prayed the mob wouldn't see it, that the shadows of the trees would hide her. But the villagers were relentless, their torches cutting through the night like searching eyes. As she reached the edge of the woods, a figure stepped out of the shadows. Emilia froze, her breath caught in her throat. It was Mateo, his old frame silhouetted against the dim light of the torches behind him. Go, he said, his voice low but firm. I'll slow them down. But don't argue. Just go. Emilia hesitated for only a moment before nodding. Thank you, she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Mateo turned to face the approaching mob as Emilia disappeared into the woods. The cries of the baby grew softer as she ran, and the light from its skin began to fade, leaving only the faint glow of the moon to guide her. Emilia ran deeper into the woods, the towering trees closing in around her like silent sentinels. The air was thick and cold, and the distant shouts of the mob seemed to follow her, echoing through the stillness. Her legs burned with effort, and her breaths came in ragged gasps, but she couldn't stop, not with her baby in her arms, not with the danger closing in. The baby stirred, letting out a faint, muffled cry, its glow flickering like the dying embers of a fire. Emilia shushed it gently, her voice trembling. Please, little one, please. We have to stay quiet. The woods were a labyrinth of shadows, the path ahead barely visible under the canopy of branches. Rosa had said there was another village, but she hadn't said how far it was or how treacherous the journey would be. Emilia's heart pounded as she stumbled over roots and rocks, clutching her baby tighter with every step. Behind her, the mob was growing restless. The torchlights flickered faintly in the distance, accompanied by the sound of angry voices and snapping branches. She couldn't have gone far. Tomas's voice boomed, followed by Pilar's shrill cry. Find her. For the sake of the village. Tears streamed down Emilia's face as she pushed forward, her mind racing with desperation. She couldn't let them catch her. She couldn't let them take her baby. But the forest seemed endless, and her strength was fading. Just as she thought she couldn't go on, a clearing appeared ahead. The trees parted, revealing a small, shimmering stream that cut through the forest. The water glistened under the moonlight, its soft trickle the only sound besides Emilia's pounding heart. She paused, crouching low behind a cluster of bushes, and pressed her baby close to her chest. The baby's glow had dimmed further, its strange markings barely visible now. Emilia's fingers brushed against its tiny hand as she whispered, "We'll be okay. We'll find a way." But the peace was short-lived. The distant shouts grew louder, and the glow of torches began to flicker through the trees. The mob was closing in, their anger fueled by fear and superstition. Emilia's hands shook as she tried to think, her mind racing for a solution. Then, as if sensing her desperation, the baby stirred again. Its glow returned, faint at first, but growing brighter with each passing second. Emilia's eyes widened in fear. No, no, not now, she whispered, trying to shield the light with her shawl. Please, not now. The baby's cries began to rise, soft at first, but quickly growing louder. The glow pulsed in rhythm with its cries, casting strange, shifting shadows across the clearing. Amelia's heart sank as she realized what was happening. The baby was responding to her fear, its energy feeding off the tension in the air. No, she pleaded, her voice cracking. Please, stay quiet. Please. But it was too late. The mob had seen the light. Their voices rose in unison, and the sound of rushing footsteps echoed through the forest. There. She's there. Tomas shouted, his torch held high as he broke through the tree line. Pilar and the others followed close behind, their faces twisted with fury and fear. Emilia stumbled backward, her feet sinking into the soft earth near the stream. She held the baby tightly, her tears falling freely. Stay away, she cried, her voice trembling with equal parts fear and defiance. Please, just leave us alone. The mob encircled her, their torches casting flickering shadows across the clearing. Tomas stepped forward, his jaw set, his eyes cold. You've brought nothing but ruin to this village, he said, his voice low and dangerous. It's time we ended this. No! Emilia screamed, clutching her baby even tighter. He's just a child. He's done nothing to you. He's not a child, Pilar hissed, her voice dripping with venom. He's a monster. And if we don't act now, he'll destroy us all. The baby's cries reached a fever pitch, and the glow from its skin grew blinding. The mob shielded their eyes, their anger momentarily replaced by fear. The ground beneath them seemed to tremble, and the air grew heavy, charged with an otherworldly energy. Then, something impossible happened. The light from the baby's skin burst outward in a radiant wave, sweeping through the clearing and into the forest beyond. The mob staggered backward, their torches extinguished by the force of the light. The trees seemed to sway, their leaves shimmering as if caught in a sudden wind. And then, silence. The villagers stood frozen, their eyes wide with disbelief. Tomas dropped his torch, the wooden shaft clattering against the stones. Pilar fell to her knees, her hands clutching at the dirt as if trying to anchor herself to reality. What is this? She whispered, her voice barely audible. Emilia, still clutching her baby, felt the air grow calm. The glow from the child's skin began to fade, leaving only the soft light of the moon to illuminate the clearing. She looked down at her baby, her breath catching in her throat. The markings on its skin had shifted again, forming intricate, glowing patterns that seemed almost alive. They pulsed softly, like the heartbeat of the earth itself. Emilia felt a strange sense of peace wash over her, as if the baby were trying to tell her something she couldn't quite understand. The villagers began to retreat, their fear outweighing their anger. One by one, they disappeared into the forest, their whispers fading into the distance. Only Tomas and Pilar remained, their expressions unreadable as they stared at Emilia and the child. You should go, Tomas said finally, his voice hollow. Leave this place. Don't come back. Emilia nodded, her tears falling silently. She turned and began to walk toward the stream, her baby cradled in her arms. The forest seemed to open up before her, the path ahead bathed in moonlight. Behind her, Tomas and Pilar stood in silence, their figures growing smaller with each step. Emilia didn't look back. She couldn't. All she could do was keep moving forward, her child's faint glow lighting the way. Emilia trudged onward through the forest, her bare feet raw and aching from the rough terrain. Each step felt heavier than the last, but she refused to stop. The baby rested against her chest, its glow faint now, as if the burst of energy had drained it. The woods around her were eerily silent, save for the rustle of leaves and the gentle wind. Even the animals seemed to keep their distance, their usual nocturnal calls absent, leaving only the sound of Emilia's labored breathing. She didn't know how long she had been walking. Hours? Days? Time blurred as exhaustion took hold of her body. The baby stirred occasionally, letting out soft whimpers, but otherwise remained quiet. The strange, glowing patterns on its skin had dimmed but not disappeared, shifting faintly as if alive. Emilia tried not to think about what the villagers had said about their fear and hatred. She focused on one thought, finding safety for herself and her child. The woods began to change. The dense trees thinned slightly, and the ground became softer, covered in a carpet of moss. The air grew colder, and a mist began to creep in, clinging to the ground and swirling around her ankles. Emilia shivered, clutching the baby tighter. She could feel something in the air, something heavy and watchful, as if the forest itself were alive and aware of her presence. She stumbled into another clearing, this one larger than the last. In the center stood a towering, ancient tree with roots that twisted and gnarled like the hands of an old man. The tree seemed to pulse faintly, its bark glowing with the same light as her child's skin. Emilia froze, her heart pounding. She had never seen anything like it. The baby stirred in her arms, its tiny hand reaching out toward the tree. The glow on its skin brightened slightly, as if responding to the tree's presence. Emilia hesitated, unsure whether to approach or flee. But something about the tree felt calming. Protective, even. She took a cautious step forward, then another. As she drew closer, the glow from the tree grew stronger, illuminating the clearing in a soft, golden light. Emilia knelt at the base of the tree, her breath catching in her throat. The roots shifted slightly, as if making room for her. She leaned against the trunk, feeling its warmth seep into her tired body. For the first time in days, she felt a small measure of peace. "You found it," a voice said, breaking the silence. Emilia whipped around, her heart leaping into her throat. A figure stood at the edge of the clearing, cloaked in shadows. The voice was soft but firm, carrying an otherworldly resonance that sent a shiver down her spine. "Who are you?" Emilia asked, her voice trembling. The figure stepped forward, revealing a tall, willowy woman dressed in flowing robes that seemed to shimmer like moonlight. Her eyes glowed faintly, and her hair cascaded like a river of silver. She exuded an aura of calm, yet there was something undeniably powerful about her presence. "I am called Ilaria," the woman said, her gaze fixed on Emilia and the child. "And you are the one I've been waiting for." "Waiting for?" Emilia echoed, clutching the baby protectively. "I don't understand." Ilaria approached slowly, her movements graceful and deliberate. "The child you carry is no ordinary being. It is connected to the ancient forces that flow through this land, forces that have been dormant for centuries. The villagers feared it because they did not understand. But this child is not a curse, it is a gift." "A gift?" Emilia looked down at her baby, tears welling in her eyes. "But why? Why me? I'm nobody." "You are stronger than you know," Ilaria said, her voice gentle. "You have endured what many could not. That strength is why the child chose you." "Chose me?" Emilia shook her head, confusion and exhaustion clouding her thoughts. "I didn't choose this. I didn't ask for any of this." "Destiny rarely asks for permission," Ilaria replied, her expression softening. "But it has a way of finding those who are meant to carry its weight." Emilia stared at the woman, struggling to process her words. The baby cooed softly, its tiny hand reaching out again, this time toward Ilaria. The glowing patterns on its skin pulsed faintly, mirroring the light of the tree. What is he?" Emilia asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What does this mean?" Ilaria knelt beside her, her glowing eyes meeting Emilia's. "He is a bridge," she said. "A link between worlds, between the ancient and the new. He carries within him the power to heal or to destroy, depending on how he is guided. That is why you must protect him, no matter the cost." "But I don't know how," Emilia said, her voice breaking. "I'm not strong enough." "You are," Ilaria said firmly. "And you are not alone." She reached out, placing a hand gently on the baby's forehead. The child's glow brightened, and Emilia felt a wave of warmth and calm wash over her. The tree's light pulsed in response, and the mist around them seemed to lift slightly, revealing more of the forest beyond. This place will protect you for now, Ilaria said, rising to her feet. But the journey is far from over. Others will come for the child, some who wish to harm him, and others who seek to use him for their own purposes. You must be vigilant. Emilia nodded, though her fear still lingered. What about the villagers? What if they find us? They will not enter this place, Ilaria said, her voice steady. The ancient forces here will see to that. But you cannot stay forever. When the time comes, you must be ready to leave. Emilia looked down at her baby, who was now gazing up at her with eyes that seemed far too wise for a newborn. I'll protect him, she whispered, her resolve hardening. I don't care what it takes. I won't let anyone hurt him. Ilaria smiled faintly. Good. Then you are stronger than you think. Before Emilia could say more, Ilaria began to fade, her shimmering form dissolving into the light of the tree. Emilia watched in silence, her heart heavy yet filled with a newfound determination. The forest grew quiet once more, the only sound the gentle rustle of leaves in the wind. Emilia leaned back against the tree, her baby nestled close to her chest. The glow from its skin had dimmed again, but it still pulsed faintly, a reminder of the power it carried. For now, they were safe. But Emilia knew the peace wouldn't last. The journey ahead would be long and dangerous, but she was ready. She had to be. For her child, for herself, and for whatever destiny awaited them. As dawn broke, streaks of soft sunlight pierced through the canopy of trees, illuminating the forest in shades of gold and green. Emilia stirred awake, her back pressed against the ancient tree. The warmth of the light kissed her face, and for a moment, she allowed herself to hope that the danger had passed. The baby rested peacefully in her arms, its glow subdued but steady, the strange markings on its skin calm and dormant for now. Her stomach growled, a stark reminder of how long it had been since she'd eaten. She shifted carefully, her muscles aching from the long trek and the tension of the previous night. There was no food, no water, and no certainty of where she was or where she was headed. The thought brought a lump to her throat, but she swallowed it down. She couldn't afford to panic, not now. The forest around her was quiet, almost unnaturally so. The usual sounds of birds and rustling creatures were absent, replaced by a serene stillness that felt protective, as though the woods themselves were guarding her. Emilia rose to her feet, cradling the baby in one arm as she adjusted her shawl. The tree's ancient glow had faded, its bark now appearing as any other, though she could still feel a faint hum beneath her palm when she touched it. She whispered softly to the child. We need to move. We can't stay here, little one. The baby made a soft cooing sound, its tiny hand gripping a fold of her dress. Emilia smiled faintly, brushing her fingers over its soft curls. You're strong, aren't you? Stronger than me, I think. With that, she turned toward the forest, her eyes scanning the terrain. Ilaria had said the villagers wouldn't follow her here, but Emilia wasn't naive enough to believe they wouldn't try. She needed to find food, water, and shelter, somewhere they could hide until she could figure out what to do next. The path ahead was uneven, littered with roots and stones, but Emilia pressed on. Her legs burned with the effort, her steps slow and cautious as she moved deeper into the forest. The mist from the night before had lifted, replaced by a crisp clarity that allowed her to see farther ahead. It wasn't long before she came across a small stream, its water clear and cool as it trickled over smooth rocks. Emilia knelt by the stream, her hands trembling as she cupped the water and brought it to her lips. The cool liquid soothed her parched throat, and she drank greedily, careful not to jostle the baby too much. She splashed a bit on her face, the chill waking her senses, before gently dabbing some onto the baby's forehead. The child stirred but remained calm, its glow soft and steady. As she rested by the stream, the sound of rustling leaves caught her attention. Emilia froze, her heart pounding. She scanned the trees, her breath catching in her throat. At first, she saw nothing, but then a figure emerged from the shadows, a man, his clothes tattered and his face gaunt from hunger. He stopped several feet away, his hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Don't be afraid," he said, his voice hoarse but calm. "I'm not here to hurt you." Amelia's grip on the baby tightened, her body tensing. Who are you? What do you want? The man stepped closer, though he kept his movements slow and unthreatening. My name is Jonah, he said. I live in the woods, or, well, I survive in them. I saw the light last night. The strange glow. Was that you? Amelia hesitated, unsure how to respond. She didn't know if she could trust him, but his haggard appearance and soft demeanor didn't scream danger. Still, her instincts screamed caution. It doesn't matter, she said finally, her voice firm. We're just passing through. We don't want trouble. Jonah nodded, his eyes flicking briefly to the baby before returning to Amelia's face. I understand. Trouble's the last thing I want, too. But, if you're lost or need help, I know these woods well. I can guide you. Why would you help us? Amelia asked, narrowing her eyes. Jonah's face softened, and for a moment, he looked almost sad. Because once, someone helped me when I was lost. And because I know what it's like to be hunted. His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken meaning. Amelia studied him carefully, searching for any hint of deception, but found none. The weariness in his eyes was genuine, and there was a kindness in his voice that she hadn't heard in what felt like forever. Finally, she nodded. We need to find somewhere safe. Away from the villagers. Jonah's brow furrowed. Villagers? You mean San Belladou? Amelia stiffened. You know it? He gave a bitter laugh. Oh, I know it. I lived there once, before they turned on me. Superstitious lot. They don't take kindly to anything different. Amelia's chest tightened. What happened? Jonah's gaze darkened, his jaw tightening. Let's just say they thought I brought bad luck. Crops failed, livestock died, and they needed someone to blame. So they blamed me. Drove me out into these woods years ago. Amelia's heart ached at his words, the parallel to her own situation striking too close to home. She glanced down at her baby, who was staring up at Jonah with curious, luminous eyes. The man noticed and smiled faintly. That child, Jonah said softly. There's something special about him, isn't there? Amelia tensed again, but Jonah raised his hands quickly. No, I don't mean any harm. I felt it. When the light burst last night. It was powerful. Like nothing I've ever seen. I don't know what he is, Amelia admitted quietly. But I'll protect him. No matter what. Jonah nodded. Then let me help. There's a place deeper in the woods, an old hunting cabin. The villagers don't know about it. You'll be safe there for a while. Amelia hesitated, fear and hope warring within her. She didn't know if she could trust Jonah, but she also knew she couldn't survive alone much longer. Finally, she nodded. Lead the way. Jonah smiled faintly and turned, motioning for her to follow. Amelia adjusted the baby in her arms and stepped after him, her heart heavy with uncertainty. As they disappeared deeper into the forest, she couldn't shake the feeling that their journey was only just beginning, and that the danger was far from over. The journey through the woods was long and treacherous, the terrain growing more rugged and unforgiving the deeper they ventured. Jonah moved with the ease of someone who had spent years navigating the forest, his steps careful but confident. Amelia followed closely, her arms aching from holding the baby, but she refused to complain. The child rested peacefully, its glow faint but steady, a soft warmth against her chest. They walked in silence for what felt like hours, the trees around them growing taller and denser. The air was cooler here, heavy with the scent of earth and moss. Occasionally, Jonah would pause to listen, his eyes scanning the shadows, but he said nothing. Amelia could feel the weight of the forest pressing down on her, its stillness both protective and oppressive. Finally, they emerged into a small clearing, where an old, weathered cabin stood hidden among the trees. The structure was simple, made of dark wood and patched with uneven planks. It leaned slightly to one side, but it was still standing, its chimney releasing a faint wisp of smoke that suggested recent use. "This is it," Jonah said, his voice low. "It's not much, but it's safe. No one from the village would ever come this far." Amelia stared at the cabin, her exhaustion overwhelming her relief. She nodded, clutching the baby tightly as Jonah pushed open the creaky door and stepped inside. The interior was sparse but functional, a small table, a few chairs, and a single cot pushed against the far wall. A fire crackled weakly in the stone hearth, casting flickering shadows across the room. "You can rest here," Jonah said, gesturing toward the cot. "I'll keep watch outside. The villagers won't stop searching right away, but they won't come near this place. They're too afraid of the woods." Amelia hesitated, her eyes searching his face. She didn't fully trust him, not yet, but she had little choice. "Thank you," she said quietly, stepping inside and settling onto the cot with the baby. Jonah nodded and stepped back out, closing the door behind him. Amelia exhaled shakily, her body sinking into the thin mattress. For the first time in what felt like days, she allowed herself to relax, if only a little. She laid the baby down beside her, its tiny hand gripping her finger as its glow pulsed softly in the dim light. "You're safe now," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "For now." Hours passed, and Amelia drifted in and out of sleep, her dreams filled with fleeting images of glowing trees and shadowy figures. The baby slept soundly, its presence a constant source of warmth. Outside, the forest remained silent, the distant sounds of animals and rustling leaves a comforting reminder of life beyond the danger. It wasn't until the middle of the night that Amelia awoke to the sound of voices, angry, panicked voices that carried through the trees. Her heart leapt into her throat as she sat up, clutching the baby instinctively. Jonah burst through the door, his face pale and his breath short. "They're coming," he said urgently. "The villagers. They found the trail." Amelia's blood ran cold. "How? You said they wouldn't come this far." "They're desperate," Jonah said. "They must have followed the light from the child last night. They'll be here soon." "What do we do?" Amelia asked, panic rising in her chest. Jonah hesitated, his jaw tightening. "There's one last place. Deeper in the woods. It's dangerous, but it might be your only chance. The villagers won't dare follow." Amelia didn't need to ask why. She could see the fear in Jonah's eyes, the way his voice wavered. But she didn't have a choice. She gathered the baby in her arms, her resolve hardening. "Lead the way." They left the cabin quickly, Jonah leading Amelia through a narrow, winding path that seemed to grow darker with every step. The trees here were ancient, their trunks twisted and their branches forming a canopy so thick it blocked out the moonlight. The air grew colder, and the forest seemed to close in around them. The sound of the mob grew louder behind them, shouts and snapping branches, the unmistakable crackle of torches. Amelia's heart raced as she stumbled after Jonah, her breaths coming in short, sharp gasps. The baby stirred in her arms, its glow brightening as if sensing the danger. Finally, they reached another clearing. In the center stood a massive stone archway, its surface covered in the same glowing patterns that adorned the baby's skin. The air around it seemed to hum with energy, and Amelia felt a strange pull toward it, as if the archway were alive. Jonah stopped, his face pale. "This is it," he said. "The passage. I don't know what's on the other side, but the villagers won't follow. They're too afraid of what they don't understand." Amelia stared at the archway, her mind racing. She could feel the energy emanating from it, a strange mix of fear and comfort. The baby's glow grew brighter, its markings pulsing in rhythm with the hum of the archway. "What happens if I go through?" Amelia asked, her voice trembling. Jonah shook his head. "I don't know. But it's your only chance." The sound of the mob was close now, their voices echoing through the trees. Amelia turned to Jonah, her eyes filled with gratitude and fear. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. Jonah nodded. "Go. Protect the child." Emilia stepped toward the archway, the baby held tightly against her chest. The glow from the markings intensified, and the air around her seemed to shimmer. She took a deep breath, her heart pounding, and stepped through. The world shifted around her, a blinding light enveloping her as the forest disappeared. She felt weightless, as if suspended in time and space. The baby's glow surrounded them both, its warmth a beacon in the unknown. When the light faded, Emilia found herself standing in a vast, open field. The sky above was a deep, endless blue, and the air was warm and fragrant with the scent of wildflowers. In the distance, she saw a figure approaching, a woman cloaked in silver, her hair flowing like moonlight. Ilaria smiled as she reached Emilia. "You've done well," she said softly. "You're safe now. The child is where it needs to be." Emilia fell to her knees, tears streaming down her face. The baby cooed softly in her arms, its glow steady and calm. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emilia allowed herself to breathe. She didn't know what lay ahead, but for now, she and her child were safe. And that was enough. The villagers never found them. Some say the forest swallowed them whole, its ancient magic protecting the child destined for something far greater than they could understand. And though Emilia's name faded from memory, the light of her child continued to shine, a bridge between worlds, a symbol of hope in the unknown.